Commander Zixtar pressed his clawed hand against the transparent barrier and looked out at the dying sunset on Vareth 7. The orange sky would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Today, it only reminded him how many sunsets his people might not see. 3 weeks. They had been under attack for 3 weeks. The mining outpost was never meant to be a fortress. It was a research station, a place where different species from the Galactic Union worked together to study the rare minerals beneath Vareth 7's surface. 42 people called this place home. Karathi like himself, with their hard shells and compound eyes. Veluum with their smooth amphibious skin and webbed fingers. Dren whose bodies were made of living crystal that hummed softly when they communicated. Now they were all trapped here, hiding behind makeshift barriers while raiders attacked every few days. "Commander, the eastern wall took another hit," reported Veluum, one of the Veluum engineers. His large eyes showed exhaustion. Nobody had slept properly in days. Zixtar clicked his mandibles together, a gesture of frustration. "How many injured?" "2 Dren with cracks in their crystalline structure. The medical bay is treating them now." The raiders wanted the minerals. They didn't care about treaties or laws. They just wanted to take what wasn't theirs, and they were willing to kill anyone who stood in their way. Zixtar's security force was small, meant to handle minor disputes and accidents, not an organized attack by hundreds of criminals. "We need help," Zixtar said quietly. "The Union response fleet won't arrive for 5 more days," Veluum replied. His voice carried the weight of hopelessness. "We don't have 5 days." Zixtar knew this. The raiders were getting bolder. Their attacks were becoming more coordinated. Yesterday, they had nearly breached the northern perimeter. If they broke through the defenses, everyone inside would die. "Send an emergency transmission to the nearest Union vessel," Zixtar ordered. "Request immediate military assistance. We need soldiers. Maybe 10 or 15 trained fighters. Enough to hold the perimeter until the fleet arrives." Veluum hesitated. "Commander, the nearest Union military vessel is 2 days away. The only ship close enough to help is—" "What?" "A human diplomatic vessel. The UGSS Meridian. They're 8 hours away." Zixtar had never met humans before. They were one of the newer species in the Galactic Union, having joined only 30 years ago. He knew they were strange compared to other species. They came from a death world, a planet so hostile that it had shaped them into something unusual. They were fragile in some ways, with soft skin and weak natural defenses, but they reproduced quickly and adapted to almost any environment. "Send the transmission anyway," Zixtar decided. "If they have even a small security team, it might be enough." Veluum nodded and moved to the communication console. Within minutes, the message was transmitted into space, carrying a desperate plea for help. 8 light-years away, Captain Minjun Park sat in the command chair of the UGSS Meridian and read the distress signal. His dark eyes scanned the message 3 times before he looked up at his executive officer. "Lieutenant Chen, what's our current mission status?" he asked. Sarah Chen pulled up the data on her tablet. "We're transporting diplomatic documents to the Anteri station, sir. Due to arrive in 4 days, nothing urgent." Min Jun drummed his fingers on the armrest. The distress call was clear. 42 people were going to die unless someone helped them. The official Union response was 5 days away. The Meridian could be there in 8 hours. "They're asking for 10 to 15 soldiers," Chen said, reading the message again. "We have a security detail of 20. We could send a team." Minjun stood up and walked to the viewport. Outside, stars stretched in every direction. Somewhere out there, people were scared and dying. They weren't human, but that didn't matter. They were people. "Lieutenant Chen, send a message to Colonel Nam on the Triumph and the Phoenix," Minjun said slowly. Chen's eyes widened. "Sir, those are troop carriers. Are you suggesting—" "Yes. Activate Protocol Shepard." There was silence on the bridge. Every human officer knew what Protocol Shepard meant. It was a doctrine that their military had created after joining the Galactic Union. It was simple. When someone calls for help, you don't send the minimum. You send everything you can. "Sir, they only asked for 15 soldiers," Chen said carefully. "Colonel Nam commands an entire regiment, 800 troops. I know what they asked for, Lieutenant, but they're in danger, and we have the ability to help. We're not sending a token force to make ourselves feel better. We're sending enough soldiers to guarantee their survival." Chen smiled. It was a small smile, but it carried pride. "Changing course to Varath 7, sir. Estimated arrival in 8 hours." Throughout the 3 ships, human soldiers began preparing for deployment. The 5th Expeditionary Regiment had been on a routine transport mission, moving to a new posting on the frontier. Now they had a different mission. Colonel Ji-Hoon Nam received the briefing in his quarters on the troop carrier Triumph. He read the distress call and immediately began planning the operation. 42 civilians needed protection. The raiders numbered in the hundreds, possibly more. A normal military force might send a platoon. Humans were not normal. "Get me casualty estimates if we commit the full regiment," Nam ordered his staff. "Sir, the colonists only requested a squad," one officer said hesitantly. Nam looked at him with hard eyes. "Did I ask what they requested? I asked for casualty estimates. Those people are dying. We're 8 hours away. We have 800 trained soldiers. We're going to use them." Back on Varath 7, Zixtar waited for a response to his transmission. He expected a polite message explaining that a small team would be dispatched, or perhaps a regretful note that no help was available in time. What he received was a simple message. "Help is coming. Hold your position. 8 hours." The message came from Captain Minjun Park of the UGSS Meridian. Zixtar gathered his exhausted defenders and shared the news. They would hold for 8 more hours. Then human reinforcements would arrive. A small team, maybe 10 or 12 soldiers, but it would be better than nothing. None of them knew what was actually coming. In orbit above their planet, 3 human vessels were approaching at maximum speed, carrying the entire 5th Expeditionary Regiment, complete with combat engineers, medical teams, field hospitals, and enough supplies to fight a war. The humans had received a call for help. They were bringing an answer that would change everything. The first indication that something unusual was happening came from the sensor station. Veloum stared at his display screen with confusion spreading across his amphibious features. "Commander Zixtar, you need to see this," he called out. Zixtar rushed to the sensor console, his chitinous legs clicking against the metal floor. "What is it? Are the raiders attacking again?" "No, sir. I'm detecting incoming vessels. The human reinforcements." "Good. How large is their dropship?" Veloum's webbed fingers moved across the controls, recalibrating the sensors. "Sir, there's no dropship. I'm reading 3 separate vessels. Large ones." Zixtar felt his antennae twitch with confusion. 3 vessels? For a squad of soldiers? "I don't understand it either, Commander. The sensor profile shows a diplomatic cruiser, 2 heavy troop carriers, and a support frigate. They're entering orbit now." Around them, other defenders began to gather, staring at the display. The Dren scientist Krystal hummed with curiosity, her crystalline body reflecting the light from the screens. "Perhaps the readings are wrong," she suggested in her musical voice. "Humans are new to the Union. Maybe their small vessels register as large on our sensors." But the readings weren't wrong. Within minutes, the human vessels were in stable orbit, and launch bays were opening. What descended from those bays made everyone in the command center stop and stare in disbelief. Dropships, dozens of them. They filled the sky like a swarm of metal insects, their engines roaring as they descended toward the outpost. Each one was packed with soldiers in gray and blue armor, their faces hidden behind helmets with glowing displays. Zixtar had asked for 10 or 15 soldiers. What landed on the dusty ground of Varath 7 was an army. The first dropship touched down with a heavy thud that shook the ground. Its ramp lowered, and humans marched out in perfect formation. They moved with practiced efficiency, immediately spreading out to secure the landing zone. More dropships followed, disgorging soldiers, equipment, and vehicles. Zixtar watched through the outpost windows, his compound eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. Hundreds of humans. No, not hundreds. When he tried to count the arriving soldiers, he lost track. There were too many. A tall human in officer's armor approached the outpost entrance. Two guards flanked him, their weapons held ready but not threatening. When Zixtar opened the door, the officer removed his helmet, revealing a middle-aged man with short dark hair and calm eyes. "Commander Zixtar?" the human asked in clear Galactic Standard. "Yes, I am Zixtar. I sent the distress call." The human extended his hand, a gesture Zixtar recognized as a greeting. "Colonel Ji-Hoon Nam, commander of the 5th Expeditionary Regiment. We received your request for assistance." Zixtar clasped the offered hand awkwardly with his clawed appendage. Colonel, I think there has been a mistake. I requested 10 to 15 soldiers. You seem to have brought 800 soldiers, complete with combat engineers, medical staff, field hospitals, air support, and enough supplies for extended operations. Nam finished. Yes, that is correct. But why? This is a small mining outpost. We only needed a few trained fighters to help hold the perimeter until the Union fleet arrives. Colonel Nam's expression didn't change. You asked for help, Commander. We don't do half measures when lives are at stake. All 42 of your people matter. We brought enough force to make sure all 42 survive. Behind Nam, human soldiers were already moving with purpose. Engineers in specialized armor were examining the damaged eastern wall. Medical personnel with red crosses on their armor were setting up a field hospital. Soldiers were taking up defensive positions along the perimeter. Veloum appeared at Zixtar's side, his large eyes even wider than usual. "Commander, they're everywhere. They've deployed defensive barriers around our entire compound. They're installing automated turrets. There are engineers reinforcing every weak point in our walls." A human soldier approached and saluted Colonel Nam. "Sir, initial defensive assessment complete. We're establishing overlapping fields of fire. Combat engineers estimate 4 hours to full fortification." "Make it 3, Lieutenant Park," Nam replied, "and coordinate with the local defenders. They've been holding this position for 3 weeks. They know the ground better than we do." The soldier saluted again. "Yes, sir. I'll consult with Commander Zixtar's personnel immediately." Zixtar was still trying to understand the situation. "Colonel Nam, please, we cannot ask you to commit so many resources to our small outpost. The risk to your soldiers." Nam turned to face him directly. "Commander, let me be clear about something. You did not ask us to risk our soldiers. You asked us to save your people. Those are the same thing to us. When someone calls for help, humans respond with everything we have. That is who we are." Another human officer approached. She was younger than Nam, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Colonel, medical teams are ready to treat the wounded. We have 23 defenders with various injuries according to initial scans." "Good work, Lieutenant Chen. Coordinate with their medical personnel, and make sure our doctors understand alien physiology. I don't want any treatment complications." Chen nodded. "Already done, sir. Dr. Kim has been reviewing Karathi, Veluum, and Dren medical databases since we entered orbit." Throughout the compound, exhausted defenders watched in amazement as humans transformed their desperate position into a fortress. Soldiers who had been fighting for 3 weeks with minimal rest were gently but firmly ordered to the sleeping quarters. Human troops took over their positions without complaint. A young Dren scientist approached a human engineer who was working on the power distribution system. "Excuse me, but that section is very delicate. Our crystal-based technology is difficult for other species to understand." The engineer looked up and smiled. You're absolutely right. Would you mind explaining how the resonance frequency affects power flow? I want to make sure I don't accidentally damage anything while I'm reinforcing the connections. The Dren was startled. Most species dismissed their technology as primitive or incomprehensible. This human wanted to learn. In the medical bay, a Karathi defender named Kixal lay on a table with a cracked section of his carapace. He had been injured 2 days ago, and their limited medical supplies could only stabilize him, not heal him properly. A human medic knelt beside the table. Her name tag read, Specialist Lee. She examined the injury carefully, then consulted her medical tablet. "This is going to hurt a little," she said gently. "But I can seal this crack and promote healing. We've adapted our regenerative nanites to work with Karathi biology." You have medicine for my species?" Kixal asked in disbelief. "But humans have only been in the Union for 30 years. Lee smiled as she prepared the treatment. "We've spent those 30 years learning everything we can about our neighbors. Hold still now." Outside, Colonel Nam stood with Commander Zixtar on a newly reinforced observation platform. Below them, human soldiers worked alongside alien defenders, coordinating their efforts seamlessly. "I still don't understand," Zixtar admitted. "We are not your people. Most species in the Union would have sent a token force at best. You brought an entire regiment for strangers." Nam was quiet for a moment, watching his soldiers work. "Commander, humanity learned something important when we reached the stars. We learned that being different species doesn't make someone less important. Every life has value. Karathi, Veluum, Dren, human. It doesn't matter. You asked for help. That made you our responsibility. But the cost of doing the right thing is never too high," Nam interrupted gently. "Besides, saving lives is what soldiers are for. Not just human lives, all lives." Zixtar clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. In 3 weeks of desperate fighting, he had never imagined help would come like this. An entire human regiment, treating his small outpost as if it were their own home, treating his people as if they were worth dying for. "Thank you, Colonel," he said finally. "I don't know what else to say." "You don't have to say anything, Commander. Just help us keep everyone alive. We're going to need your expertise. Your people know these raiders better than we do." For the first time in 3 weeks, Zixtar felt something he thought he had lost. Hope. The raiders watched from their hidden positions in the rocky hills surrounding the outpost. Through their scopes and sensors, they observed the massive human deployment with growing concern. "What are we looking at?" Their leader, a scarred Grath mercenary named Vorkosh, growled into his communicator. "Estimate 800 soldiers, boss," his second-in-command reported. "Heavy weapons, automated defenses, military-grade shields. This isn't a security detail. This is an army." Vorkosh crushed the communicator in his clawed hand. For 3 weeks, they had been slowly breaking down the outpost's defenses. Now these humans had arrived and turned everything upside down. But Vorkosh was not one to back down from a fight. He had a reputation to maintain. "Prepare a probing attack," he ordered. "Hit the southern perimeter with missiles. Let's see how these humans handle real combat." 2 hours later, the raiders launched their assault. 6 missiles screamed through the air toward the outpost, targeting the southern wall where the science laboratories were located. Inside those labs, 3 Dren researchers were conducting critical analysis of mineral samples. The human defensive systems tracked the incoming missiles immediately. Automated turrets swiveled and fired, destroying 4 missiles in mid-air. The remaining 2 adjusted their flight paths, evading the defensive fire. Lieutenant Park Seo-yeon was commanding the southern perimeter. She saw the missiles coming and made an instant calculation. The missiles would hit the laboratory section in 3 seconds. The Dren inside couldn't be evacuated in time. Her squad was positioned directly in front of the lab. "Shields forward!" she shouted. "Protect the structure!" Her soldiers didn't hesitate. They activated their personal shields and formed a barrier with their own bodies between the missiles and the laboratory. The explosions hammered into the human position with tremendous force. The soldiers absorbed the blast that was meant for the Dren scientists. When the smoke cleared, 5 human soldiers were lying on the ground with injuries. Their armor had taken the worst of the impact, but they had been thrown several meters by the force of the explosions. Medical teams rushed forward immediately. Inside the laboratory, the 3 Dren researchers stood unharmed, staring in shock at what had just happened. The humans had used their own bodies as shields, for strangers, for aliens they had never met before today. Crystal, the lead researcher, rushed outside. Her crystalline body was trembling with emotion. "Why did you do that? You could have been killed." Lieutenant Park was helping one of her injured soldiers to his feet. She looked at Crystal with genuine confusion. "You were in danger. We protected you. That's our job. But we are not your species. We are not your responsibility." Park's expression softened. "Your people. That makes you our responsibility. That's how humans see things." The Raider attack was repelled easily after that. The human defensive positions were too strong, too well coordinated. Vorkash watched the failed assault and realized he had made a serious miscalculation. "Get me intelligence on these humans," he demanded. "What kind of species brings this much force to protect a mining outpost?" The answer came back in fragments, pieced together from intercepted communications and sensor readings. What Vorkash learned made him deeply uncomfortable. The humans weren't treating this as a military operation. They were treating it as a rescue mission. Every single life in that outpost, regardless of species, was being protected as if it were precious. The human communications revealed something that no raider had ever encountered before. There were no acceptable losses in human military doctrine. 0. Not one life was considered expendable. Inside the outpost, the alien defenders were beginning to understand the same thing. Velium worked alongside human engineers to repair the underground water distribution system. The Velium engineer knew the tunnels better than anyone, having designed many of them himself. He expected the humans to ignore his expertise and use their own methods, as most species did when working with aliens. Instead, combat engineer Sergeant Kim Hae-won listened intently to everything Velium said. When Velium suggested using the natural water channels to improve the system efficiency, Kim didn't dismiss it. She incorporated the idea into the redesign immediately. "This is brilliant," Kim said, studying Velium's schematic. "Your people have an intuitive understanding of fluid dynamics that we're still trying to learn. Would you be willing to teach me more about Velium engineering principles?" Velium's large eyes blinked in surprise. You want to learn from me?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I? You're the expert on this system. I'd be foolish not to learn from the best." In the medical bay, Dr. Lee Soo-jin was facing a critical situation. A Velium defender had been injured in the missile attack, suffering damage to his respiratory system. Velium biology was complex, and their breathing mechanism worked differently from any species Lee had treated before. She studied the medical database, consulted with the outpost's medical staff, and worked for 14 hours straight to save the patient. She adapted human surgical techniques to work with Velium physiology, creating new procedures on the spot. When the Velium patient finally stabilized, Lee collapsed into a chair, exhausted but satisfied. A Dren medical assistant hummed with admiration. "You saved his life," the assistant said. "Most doctors would not work so hard for a different species." Lee looked confused. "He needed help. That's all that matters. I'm a doctor. I save lives. I don't care what species they are." Commander Zixtar observed all of this from his command post. He watched humans integrating with his defenders, not as superior officers taking over, but as equals working together. When Colonel Nam held a strategy meeting, he didn't just inform the alien defenders of his plans. He asked for their input. Commander Zixtar, your people have been fighting these raiders for 3 weeks, Nam said during the briefing. You know their tactics. What patterns have you observed? Zixtar was taken aback. You want my tactical assessment? Of course. You have experience with this enemy that we don't have. Your knowledge is valuable. Zixtar shared what he had learned. The raiders attacked in waves, testing defenses before committing their full force. They favored night attacks when sensors were less effective. They had at least 300 fighters, possibly more. Nam listened carefully to every word. Then he turned to his officers. Lieutenant Park, adjust the defensive rotation to account for night attack probability. Lieutenant Chen, coordinate with Commander Zixtar on sensor placement. Use Karathi tactical networks if they're more effective than our systems. Zixtar realized what was happening. The humans weren't just defending the outpost. They were empowering the original defenders, making them part of the solution, rather than treating them as victims who needed to be saved. That evening, as the sun set on Varath 7, Zixtar stood beside Colonel Nam on the reinforced walls. The transformation of the outpost was complete. What had been a desperate collection of failing defenses was now a proper military position. Your soldiers died for my people today, Zixtar said quietly. The ones who shielded the laboratory. They could have let the missiles hit. It would have been safer for them. Nam nodded. They could have. But that's not who we are. I am beginning to understand that. But I still do not fully understand why. What makes humans value alien lives so highly? Nam thought for a moment before answering. Before we joined the Galactic Union, humans fought terrible wars against each other. We learned something from those wars. We learned that dividing people into us and them only leads to suffering. When we reached the stars, we decided that everyone we meet is us, not them. Us. Even species you have never encountered before? Especially species we've never encountered before. Every new friend is another reason to celebrate the diversity of life in the universe. Every person we save is a victory against the darkness. Zixtar clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The raiders will attack again. They will not accept this defeat easily. I know, Nam replied. But when they come, they're going to face something they've never encountered before. They're going to face humans who believe that every life is worth protecting, and they're going to fail. In the hills, Vorkash was planning his final assault, unaware that he was about to learn a harsh lesson about what happens when you threaten people under human protection. Vorkash stared at the tactical display showing the human-reinforced outpost. His pride had taken a severe blow, and he refused to retreat in defeat. He made a decision that would prove to be his greatest mistake. Contact the mothership, he ordered. Tell them to bring everything. I want orbital support, all reserve fighters, and every piece of heavy weapons we have. We're going to crush this position and show the entire sector that nobody makes a fool of me. His second-in-command hesitated. Boss, intelligence reports suggest the humans have an entire regiment down there. Maybe we should... I don't care what they have, Vorkash roared. We have 2,000 fighters and a mothership with orbital cannons. We're going to overwhelm them with pure numbers. Within hours, the Raider mothership entered orbit. It was a massive vessel cobbled together from stolen military hardware and black market weapons. On the ground, Raider forces began massing in the hills, preparing for an all-out assault. Human sensors detected the buildup immediately. Colonel Nam studied the reports with a grim expression. The Raiders were committing everything to this attack. It would be the largest assault the outpost had faced. Call a commander's meeting, Nam ordered. I want all department heads and senior defenders present. 30 minutes later, the command center was filled with both human officers and the original alien defenders. Nam stood before a holographic display showing the enemy positions. The Raiders are preparing a full assault, he began. Approximately 2,000 fighters with orbital support from their mothership. They intend to overwhelm us through superior numbers. Around the room, some of the alien defenders showed signs of fear. 2,000 raiders against 800 human soldiers and 42 original defenders. The numbers seemed impossible. Nam continued speaking. We have advantages they don't. We have better training, superior defensive positions, and we're fighting to protect lives rather than for profit. But we also need to be smart about this. That's why I'm assigning command positions based on expertise, not species. He turned to Commander Zixtar. Commander, your Karathi tactical networks are superior to our systems for coordinating rapid defensive responses. I want you commanding the eastern perimeter. Your people will integrate with my 3rd Battalion. Zixtar's antennae stood upright in shock. You want me to command human soldiers? I want you to command the defense where your expertise will save the most lives, Nam corrected. My soldiers will follow your orders because you know what you're doing. He turned to Velum next. Engineer Velum, the underground tunnel network is your design. If raiders try to infiltrate through those tunnels, you'll see them coming before our sensors do. I want you controlling all subterranean defensive systems. You'll coordinate with our combat engineers. Velum's large eyes were wide with disbelief. You trust me with critical defensive systems? I trust you with what you know best. That's how we're going to win this. Lieutenant Park Seo-yeon spoke up from her position by the tactical display. Colonel, the Raider mothership has orbital cannons. If they target our medical facilities or civilian shelters, they won't get the chance, Nam replied. Our frigate will provide counter-battery fire, but I want all non-combat personnel moved to the reinforced underground bunkers. Medical teams, researchers, anyone who isn't directly involved in the defense. Sir, Lieutenant Chen added, that includes the original defenders who are still recovering from injuries. Nam nodded. Move them to safety, and make sure our wounded are right there with them. We protect everyone equally. The battle began 3 hours after sunset. The raiders launched their assault with orbital bombardment, heavy cannons from their mothership firing down at the outpost. The human frigate intercepted most of the fire, its defensive systems creating a protective umbrella over the compound. What got through was absorbed by the reinforced shields and hardened structures the combat engineers had built. The humans had prepared well. Then the ground assault began. 2,000 raiders swarmed toward the outpost from all directions, screaming battle cries and firing weapons wildly. They had numbers, they had aggression, they had confidence that sheer volume of force would break any defense. They had never fought humans before. The eastern perimeter came under assault first. 500 raiders charged toward the walls, expecting to overwhelm the defenders quickly. Instead, they encountered something unexpected. The defense was coordinated with a precision that seemed impossible. Commander Zixtar stood in the command bunker, his claws dancing across the Karathi tactical network controls. He could see every human soldier's position, track every raider movement, and coordinate responses with speed that human systems couldn't match. When raiders tried to concentrate their attack on a weak point, Zixtar shifted defenders instantly to counter it. 3rd Battalion, shift left 30 meters, he ordered in clear Galactic Standard. Heavy weapons team, target coordinates I'm transmitting now. The human soldiers responded immediately, following his commands without hesitation. They trusted him, not because he was their species, but because he knew what he was doing. The raiders crashed against the eastern perimeter like waves against a cliff. Every attempt to break through was met with perfectly coordinated fire. Zixtar's tactical brilliance combined with human discipline and firepower created an impenetrable defense. Underground, raiders tried a different approach. A force of 200 infiltrators entered the tunnel network, planning to emerge inside the compound and attack from within. It was a good plan. Against any other defenders, it might have worked. Engineer Velum watched his displays with calm focus. The tunnel system was his masterpiece, and he knew every centimeter of it. When raiders entered the tunnels, he saw them immediately. Not on sensors, but through the subtle changes in water pressure and airflow that only a veluum could detect. "Combat engineers, I'm marking collapse points," he transmitted. "Prepare demolition charges at locations I'm sending." The human engineers worked with perfect efficiency. They placed charges exactly where Veluum indicated, trusting his knowledge completely. When the raiders were deep in the tunnel system, Veluum gave the order. "Detonate!" Precisely calculated explosions collapsed sections of tunnel, trapping the raiders in dead ends and cutting off their retreat. The infiltration force was neutralized without a single raider reaching the compound. The fiercest fighting came at the northern perimeter. Raiders breached the outer wall with a concentrated assault, pouring through the gap in a desperate bid to reach the compound interior. Between them and the medical facilities stood Sergeant Kim Hae-won's platoon. 40 human soldiers against 300 raiders in close-quarters combat. The mathematics seemed impossible. Kim's soldiers didn't retreat. They fought with a ferocity born from knowing that behind them were wounded defenders of all species who couldn't protect themselves. They held their ground in a brutal melee that left bodies on both sides. Kim herself took a raider blade through her shoulder but kept fighting. A young private named Cho Min-seok lost his helmet to an explosion, but used his damaged rifle as a club to protect a fallen comrade. The platoon suffered 70% casualties, but they held long enough for human combat engineers to erect emergency barriers, sealing the breach. Throughout the battle, human soldiers displayed something the raiders had never encountered. They didn't fight to conquer, they fought to protect. When a raider weapon targeted a section where Dren researchers were sheltering, humans threw themselves into the line of fire. When a Karathi defender was injured, humans carried him to safety under heavy fire. The raiders began to break. They were fighting for profit, for reputation, for pride. The humans were fighting for something far more powerful. They were fighting for people they had decided were worth dying for. When the raider mothership attempted to bombard the medical facilities directly, the human frigate placed itself between the orbital cannons and the compound. The frigate took damage that made it list heavily in orbit, but the medical facilities remained untouched. Vorkash watched his assault fall apart with growing horror. His forces were being systematically destroyed by defenders who seemed willing to sacrifice everything to protect a small mining outpost that wasn't even their own. "Retreat!" he finally screamed into his communicator. "All forces, withdraw!" The raiders fled into the night, leaving hundreds of their dead behind. They had come with overwhelming numbers and failed completely. Because they had attacked people under human protection, and humans didn't understand the concept of acceptable losses. In the command center, Colonel Nam received the casualty reports. 47 human soldiers killed, 183 wounded, but 0 casualties among the original alien defenders. 0. Commander Zixtar stood beside him, still trembling from the adrenaline of battle. "Your people died for us," he said quietly. "So many died." "They died doing what humans do best," Nam replied, "protecting others. They died making sure that every Karathi, every Veluum, every Dren in this compound lived to see tomorrow." "I do not know how to repay this." Nam smiled sadly. "You don't repay it. You honor it by living. That's what they would want." The morning sun rose over Varath 7, painting the battlefield in golden light. The outpost still stood, battered but intact. Around it, the evidence of the night's battle was everywhere. Damaged equipment, scorched earth, and the marks of explosions covered the ground. Human soldiers moved among the debris, collecting their fallen and securing the perimeter. There was no celebration, no victory cheers. The humans had won, but the cost was written on every face. Commander Zixtar walked through the compound in a daze. Everywhere he looked, he saw humans working quietly, efficiently, dealing with the aftermath. Medical teams tended to the wounded. Engineers repaired damage. Soldiers maintained their defensive positions, still alert despite their exhaustion. In the medical bay, Dr. Lee Soo-jin worked on a human soldier who had lost his leg protecting a Dren researcher. The soldier's name was Private Jang Hyun-woo, and he was only 23 years old. "Will I be able to serve again, doctor?" he asked quietly. Lee looked at him with gentle eyes. "The prosthetics are very good now. You'll walk again, maybe even run. But Hyun-woo, you've given enough. Nobody would blame you if you chose a different path." The young soldier shook his head. "I didn't give enough. I'd do it again." "That researcher is alive because I was there. That's what matters." Nearby, a Dren named Sileth sat beside the bed. His crystalline body hummed softly with emotion. "I am the researcher you saved. I want you to know that I will never forget what you did. You are a stranger to my species, yet you sacrificed your body to protect me." Hyun-woo smiled. "You're not a stranger anymore. You're someone I helped keep safe. That makes you important to me." The official Galactic Union evacuation fleet arrived in orbit at midday. 6 large transport vessels accompanied by a Union military escort. The fleet commander transmitted a message congratulating the defenders on their survival and requesting permission to land. Colonel Nam stood in the landing area as the Union officers disembarked. Admiral Cross, a Karathi military leader, approached with his antennae held high in a gesture of respect. "Colonel Nam, we received Commander Zixtar's reports of your actions here. On behalf of the Galactic Union, I want to express our gratitude for your regiment's intervention." Nam nodded politely. "We did what needed to be done, Admiral." "Indeed. However, I must admit surprise at the scale of your response. Commander Zixtar requested a small reinforcement. You brought an entire regiment." "The size of the force they requested didn't change the size of the problem, Admiral. 42 people needed protection. We brought enough soldiers to guarantee their safety." Admiral Cross studied the human colonel carefully. "At great cost to your own forces, 47 dead, nearly 200 wounded, for a mining outpost that holds no strategic value. Most species would consider this an excessive sacrifice." "Most species don't see things the way humans do," Nam replied simply. "Every life has value, regardless of strategic importance. We don't calculate whether people are worth saving. We just save them." In the command center, Zixtar was preparing his final report to Union Command. He had been trying for hours to find the right words to describe what had happened. How could he explain that a species had committed hundreds of soldiers to protect 42 aliens they had never met? How could he convey that humans had suffered massive casualties for people who were not their own? His report read, "Human forces responded to request for minimal reinforcement with deployment of full regiment numbering 800 soldiers. Human casualties, 47 killed, 183 wounded. Defender casualties under human protection, 0. Human military doctrine appears to operate on principle that all lives are equally valuable regardless of species. Will require further analysis to understand full implications of this philosophy." He paused, then added one more line. "Recommendation. Any future calls for assistance should specify if humans are to be contacted. Their response may exceed expectations in ways that are both overwhelming and profoundly moving." That evening, as the evacuation preparations were underway, something unexpected happened. The alien defenders requested a meeting with the human regiment. All of them, gathered in the main compound area. Colonel Nam and his officers arrived to find every Karathi, Veluum, and Dren defender present. They stood in organized lines. And when Nam approached, something unprecedented occurred. Commander Zixtar stepped forward. "Colonel Nam, we have learned that humans have a military tradition called a salute. It is a gesture of respect given to those who have earned honor through their actions." "That's correct," Nam replied, uncertain where this was going. "We are not human. We do not have your traditions, but we wish to honor those who died protecting us. Would you teach us this salute, so we may show proper respect?" Nam felt emotion tighten his throat. "You don't have to." "We want to," Zixtar interrupted. "Your soldiers treated us as if we were worth dying for. The least we can do is honor their sacrifice properly. And so, for the next hour, human officers taught alien defenders how to salute. They showed the Karathi how to position their claws correctly. They helped the Veluum with the angle and posture. They explained to the Dren what the gesture meant. When the 47 coffins were carried to the transport ships, every alien defender stood at attention and saluted. Karathi, Veluum, and Dren rendering human military honors to warriors who had treated them as family. Lieutenant Park Seo-Yan stood among the human soldiers, tears streaming down her face. She had lost 5 soldiers from her platoon. Seeing these aliens honor their sacrifice made the pain both worse and somehow more bearable. Later, as the human regiment prepared to depart, Colonel Nam met with Commander Zixtar one final time. They stood on the observation platform, looking out at the compound that had been transformed from a death trap into a fortress and back into a peaceful research station. "Your soldiers changed everything for us," Zixtar said quietly. "Not just the battle, the way you fought, the way you treated us. I have been in the Union military for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like it." "We're not special," Nam replied. "We just believe that every person matters." "But that is what makes you special, Colonel. Most species draw lines, us and them, our people and outsiders. Humans seem to draw no such lines. When you arrived, we were strangers. Within hours, you were treating us as if we were your own people." Nam smiled. "That's because you became our people the moment you asked for help. When someone calls out in the darkness, humans answer. It's who we are." "The Union needs to understand this," Zixtar said firmly. "They need to know that when humans ask, 'How many do you need?' the answer is always the same. You will send all of them. Will that frighten them? Knowing that we respond with such overwhelming force?" Zixtar clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Some will be frightened, but others will be grateful. Because knowing that humans protect everyone equally means that everyone can call on you for help. Even the smallest, most insignificant outpost in the galaxy can ask for aid and know that humans will come with everything they have." The regiment departed the next morning. As the dropships lifted off, carrying soldiers both living and dead back to their vessels in orbit, the alien defenders watched from the compound walls. Veluum stood beside Chrysotol, his large eyes reflecting the morning sun. "They came for us, strangers from across the galaxy, and they came with everything they had." "More than that," Chrysotol hummed. "They treated us as if we mattered. As if our lives were worth the same as human lives. Do you think other species will learn from this?" The Dren researcher was quiet for a moment. "I think the galaxy has just learned something important about humans. They don't measure the value of a life by its species. They don't calculate whether someone is worth saving. They just save everyone they can." Far above, the human vessels left orbit and jumped to hyperspace, carrying the 5th Expeditionary Regiment to their next assignment. In their wake, they left 42 grateful defenders and a story that would spread through the Galactic Union like wildfire. The story of a species that responded to "send help" with "we'll send everything." The story of humans who believed that every life was worth protecting. The story of a mining outpost that asked for a squad and received an army. In Union Command Headquarters, military leaders analyzed the incident reports. The numbers seemed impossible. A full regiment deployed to save 42 people, 47 dead, nearly 200 wounded, all to protect a strategically worthless mining outpost. But buried in the reports was a number that made them pause. 0. 0 casualties among the people humans were protecting. Not a single alien defender had died once humans took responsibility for their safety. Admiral Cross added his own note to the file. Human military doctrine defies conventional strategic thinking. They commit maximum force to minimize casualties. They value all lives equally. They will sacrifice their own people to protect aliens they have never met. Recommendation: in future conflicts, request human assistance early. When they respond, get out of their way and let them work. They will save everyone if it is possible to do so. The phrase entered Union military vocabulary quietly at first, then spread. When humans ask, "How many do you need?" the answer is always the same: all of them. And across the galaxy, on stations and outposts and colonies far from any help, people of dozens of species took comfort in a new truth. If they called for help, somewhere in the darkness, humans would answer. Not with the minimum required, with everything they had.